Who is on my Horror Mount Rushmore? This is a topic I've seen come up a little bit with other videos. I've seen it discussed on Reddit. I've seen it discussed in Facebook groups. So I wanted to come in here and give my take now. A little bit of background on my horror history. The very first horror movie I ever saw was Freddy's Dead on VHS. I thought it was one of the best movies of all time. Listen, but don't kill me. I know that Freddy's Dead is not very popular amongst horror fans, Nightmare fans, any fans really, but I will always defend it because the nostalgic goggles has me feeling like it's one of the best horror movie. Well, I'm not gonna say all that. That it's a fun horror movie with some redeemable qualities. It's probably the extent I'll go to on Freddy's Dead. But that is the start of my horror history, and I've seen pretty much most things since then. So I want to give my take on the Horror Mount Rushmore. There are a lot of horror icons out there, and they all deserve respect and recognition. And not making Horror Mount Rushmore is no slight to them. You know, this is the top. This is the top four, the cream of the crop. So there's only four names that can fit here, but I am going to do a B Mount Rushmore, which is the next four after the top four. So that'll be a future video coming up as well. But today we're talking about the very, very top icons, the goats of the goats. And this is a very tough question because you have to realize horror has a long and storied history. It's been going on since way before my days. You can make an argument that the Universal monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, they deserve to be on Horror Mount Rushmore for sure. I mean, they are the OGs, the goats, and maybe they deserve their own mountain, actually, to come to think of it. So, but for practicality reasons, because I've only been alive so long and experienced what I've experienced, I'm going to go with more of a modern Horror Mount Rushmore, let's say circa 1960s until now. Okay, so let's get started with my number one. When I think about modern day, the most important horror icon, let's cut to him right now. That's right. The one and only Mr. Shape himself, Michael Myers. Now, listen, let me just say this. Michael Myers personally is not my favorite slasher. He's not my favorite horror icon, but I do think he deserves the number one spot on this list because of his longevity. I mean, the first movie, 1978, the original Halloween, in my opinion, the best horror movie amongst all the slasher movies, amongst all the slasher franchises, the original Halloween is the best movie. Now, the franchise itself, not my favorite franchise. There's so many damn timelines that the whole franchise became a choose your scare adventure. So you have 85 different timelines. You have different versions of Michael, different masks, different mythologies, a lot going on here in this series. It's not my favorite franchise. It takes itself very seriously, whereas something like Friday the 13th actually is kind of in on the fun, knows what it's doing, knows what it's representing, and doesn't try to pass itself off as a serious movie like the Halloween movies do. So it's not my favorite franchise. It doesn't have the most rewatchability. But Michael himself from 1978 basically spawned the slasher craze that we got in the 80s. So a lot of Jason and Freddy even is probably, they owe a lot to Michael. Michael maintained relevance somewhat in the 80s with Halloween 2, Halloween 4, Halloween 5. The less said about Halloween 5, the better. Into the 90s with The Curse of Michael Myers, which the less said about the Thorn trilogy, the better. But then Halloween H2O was a huge comeback. After Scream, Jamie Lee Curtis came back, and it was a huge hit. And they followed that up with Halloween Resurrection 2002. And then we had some remakes from Rob Zombie. And then all the way to 2018, where the newest Halloween movie came out. And it's actually the highest grossing slasher of all time. Now, that's not factoring in inflation per se, but it's a huge movie. So Michael's longevity, his box office power, his cultural relevance in today's world puts him number one on Horror Mount Rushmore. Who knew that a William Shatner mask would take us so far? All right, let's get to number two on the list. That's right. None other than old Fredman himself, Mr. Krueger, Mr. Freddy Krueger. Now, I will say this. Freddy Krueger is my favorite horror icon of all time. I told you earlier, my first movie was Freddy's Dead. So I got a huge, over-the-top, ridiculous, nostalgic bias towards Freddy Krueger, and that's okay. Listen, we're all Fred heads, right? Deep down inside, we're all Fred heads. We all love the burnt pizza face guy and the mask and all that and the glove, even though Freddy did haunt my dreams as a kid a little bit. But Freddy has the highest peak, in my opinion, in terms of mainstream pop culture crossover. Freddy in the 80s was bigger than Jason and Michael. A lot. I know that those other guys have caught up in the last 20, 30 years because Freddy really hasn't been in movie theaters since Freddy vs. Jason. We don't talk about the remake. The remake doesn't exist in my eyes. It's right there in the extinct, invisible movie stack with Batman and Robin and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. We don't talk about the remake. But Freddy in the 80s had the biggest box office, bigger box office than Michael or Jason. He also had commercials, music videos, 1-800 hotlines. He had his own TV show, Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy was all over MTV, all over pop culture. He got a mention from the President of the United States in one of his speeches. Had a video game on Nintendo that really wasn't that good. Freddy was everywhere. So I think Freddy also has the most personality of all the horror icons. And the guy had more one-liners than Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s. And then I think in terms of the actual movies, the original Nightmare on Elm Street and the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors, you can stack those up against almost any of the other slasher movies. I have the original Nightmare on Elm Street right below Halloween. Dream Warriors probably is the best sequel in any of the franchises. And honestly, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is fantastic. If you haven't watched that, it's an extremely meta horror film. I would watch the rest of the series first, though. But then when you're done with the series, it's a perfect capstone to watch New Nightmare. So definitely check that out. All right, let's go to number 3. See who's coming up number 3 here. Might be a little bit predictable. We know who's coming next. That's right. That's right. That beautiful, wonderful hockey mask. You have to wonder what would have happened if Jason just kept the sack on his head and never got the hockey mask. Would he be as iconic if he was still sack-headed Jason? I think not. But that said, I think Jason, to me, has the most rewatchable movies of all the horror franchises. If I'm in the mood for something light, something fun, something I just want to turn on, and something I want to marathon, I can turn on Friday the 13th Part 2 and then go all the way through Part 6. Probably take a break before 7 because that's where I feel like the quality goes downhill a little bit. But 2 through 6, extremely rewatchable. Jason himself is a fantastic killer. He's a little more fun than Michael, even though they both share the mask. Their personality is a little bit different. Jason will branch out beyond just a knife. He'll kill you with whatever he can find in the woods in a lot of different creative ways. Jason has more of a motive because we know his background in terms of dying as a kid, or I guess not dying as a kid in Crystal Lake, depending on which mythology you believe. Or even if you want to go deep and say maybe Jason's a Deadite. I don't subscribe to that, but some people do. Either way, Jason is a fun killer with fun movies and has stood the test of time through, damn near 12 movies now. He started off in 1981 and all the way now to 2024, where there's going to be a prequel series for him, which probably will take his legacy to the next level. And also, of course, the Friday 13th video game that came out about 5, 6, 7 years ago was extremely popular as well. Jason has to be number 3 here. You can't have Horror Mount Rushmore without the old hockey face head. Although I will say this, Jason, there was no reason for you to get on that boat that was going to Manhattan. That's completely out of character. But then again, that whole movie was completely out of character. All right. Now let's stir up some controversy with number 4, because this is not going to be who you think. This is not going to be who you're suspecting. And I'll explain that afterwards. But let's go to number 4 right now. My man Chucky, the Chuckster. I know. This is not what you thought. There's somebody missing here that you think should be number 4, and I'll address that in a moment. But first, let me give full props to Mr. Chucky, the original Child's Play from 1988. Classic film. We review that in the archive. Well, we'll be reviewing the whole Child's Play series pretty soon with the podcast. But Chucky as a doll could have easily been dead in the water. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something that in most cases might be the ultimate B movie, but the personality that was inje- but the personality that was injected into Chucky through Brad Dourif's voice, through the writing, through the mannerisms, made Chucky not your typical doll. It made him actually a serious killer. Now, I'm not saying Chucky was ever scary. There's no Child's Play or Chucky movie where you legitimately are scared of him, but there is something creepy about that doll. And I think that I think Chucky has some of the more creative kills. And then also one of the big benefits of the Child's Play series that have helped it to maintain its consistency is that Don Mancini has maintained control over the entire series. So even though the series has gone in extremely different directions at certain points, it's never truly gone off course, except for maybe Seed of Chucky, which I find to be completely ridiculous and one of the worst horror sequels of all time. But putting that to the side for a moment, everything else in the series has been pretty fantastic. And the TV show, the Chucky TV show being so popular and so critically acclaimed, I think is what put Chucky in the number 4 spot here. He also has great longevity, is showing no signs of slowing down. And if you see Chucky the doll, if you hear the term Chucky the doll, mainstream America horror movie fan or not, you know who it is. So Chucky's an icon. He's number 4 on the Horror Mount Rushmore. Now, I know there's some disgruntled fans out there of certain horror franchises who feel like their dude was left out. And I want to address just a few honorary mentions who didn't quite make Horror Mount Rushmore, who were, I guess, climbing up the mountain, but still got stuck in the middle and don't have proper hydration, so could be in trouble. Maybe a rescue squad will come help them, lift them up to the top of the mountain, and maybe they can make maybe they can make Horror Mount Rushmore one day, but not today. Not on Vic's Horror Mount Rushmore. Number 1, I know. Scream fans, don't worry. I didn't forget about Ghostface. Ghostface is probably one of the most popular horror icons of the last 30 years. I don't deny that. I'm not here to doubt its popularity. I like the Scream movies as much as anybody. But Ghostface as a horror icon cannot make Horror Mount Rushmore because Ghostface is not really an actual character. He is several different characters with a mask on. So I can't really take it the same way. I know that's going to sound completely ridiculous because Jason is different actors playing Jason. There's different actors playing Michael Myers. It's just a guy under a mask, sometimes a stuntman, sometimes someone else. So that may sound ridiculous, but I mean within the story, within the universe, within the canon, Ghostface is a different person every movie. So it's like it's hard to say that Ghostface is one set character. I know that you can make the argument that the voice of Roger Jackson, that is Ghostface, and that voice is so uniquely creepy and so uniquely prominent in the horror genre that maybe that should qualify Ghostface for Horror Mount Rushmore. But yeah, the phone conversations are legendary. The voice is legendary. The costume is legendary. But the fact that it's different characters, Billy Loomis, Nancy Loomis, Roman, Charlie, and probably my favorite Jill from part 4, and all the new ones, of course, Richie and everybody. Those are all different personalities, so it's just hard for me to take Ghostface seriously as one set entity. That's the only reason why I push him. That's the only reason why he gets pushed. That's the only reason why he gets pushed slightly off my Horror Mount Rushmore. Although, again, if he's on your Horror Mount Rushmore, I think it's perfectly reasonable. It was a close call between him and Chucky, but Chucky got the nod for me. Finally, my other honorary mention that I think you could easily make a case for should be on Horror Mount Rushmore. Didn't make my cut, but that would be Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. Now, this is maybe one of my more hot takes here, but I don't think Leatherface is as iconic as the other horror villains. I don't think he's on the same level as Michael or Jason or Freddy or Chucky. I know that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the great horror movies of all time. I know that it's a trendsetter. I know that a lot of movies were spurned off of that. I know that the remake with Jessica Biel was absolutely fantastic. No doubt about it. But thinking of the overall legacy of the Texas Chainsaw movies and Leatherface, for me, it never resonated with me the same way it did with everybody else. I never really thought it was as prominent in pop culture. I never thought it was as prominent in pop culture as those other guys. I could be wrong there, and I've never been a huge fan of the series. So for me personally, I don't think that his status as a horror icon, although great, I don't think it's better than any of the aforementioned Part 4. I know a lot of people probably will put him over Chucky, and that's fair, but I think Chucky's TV show, and I think realistically, if you put pictures of them up to most people and just said, "Who is that?" I think Chucky the doll would actually maybe be more known now than Leatherface. Well, that's it for my Horror Mount Rushmore, but of course, this is just my opinion. You guys have your own opinions in the comments if you wanna put down your Horror Mount Rushmore. I'm sure, there's a debate there for sure. I'd love to see what you guys think about it. I'm gonna have very soon my B-level Horror Mount Rushmore, which is the next 4 after this 4, and maybe some of those honorary mentions will deserve a place on that list. Maybe some other guys who you may not suspect will make my list also. But until then, I appreciate you watching the video. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to subscribe.